Hey guys, what is up? Super K-Man Rocks here, and I am here for my LPL Summer Playoffs Finals overview and analysis video. This is the final series of the Summer Split Playoffs here in the LPL. By the end, of course, we are going to determine our champion of the LPL Summer Split, our number 1 seed from the LPL going to Worlds, and our number 2 seed from the LPL going to Worlds. It might not even be one of the teams that's playing in this series, depending on the outcome, so that's definitely going to be intriguing. Couple of things at the start. If you want to know my thoughts on the playoffs leading into this, specifically like the semifinals or anything recently, check out the videos up in the iCard right now. Up there is not only the semifinals video, but the entire playlist for the LPL Summer Split. Check that out if you are interested in my thoughts leading into this series. We will preview it a little bit, kind of talking about what I was expecting going into these games, but if you want a more detailed idea of where I think these teams are and, you know, what I think they're good or bad at, then you can check out all of those videos up there. I also do want to make a slight PSA. If you hear some background noise in this video, I do apologize. There's a gigantic thunderstorm going on. I try not to record during storms just because it's kind of loud and it's kind of difficult to edit out all of the background audio, but I'm actually going away for the weekend, for Labor Day weekend here in the United States, and so I have to get this video out, so I am recording through the storm. If you can hear the rain or if you can hear the thunder in the background, I apologize, but I've done my absolute best to try and get out as much of that background noise as possible. But with those PSAs out of the way, let's jump into the analysis. If you are new here, what we are going to do is go game by game, talking about the advantages and the disadvantages that each team is able to generate. I'll be giving my player of the game and my dud of the game for each game that we cover, and of course at the end of the series I will be giving my finals MVP pick to kind of wrap everything into a nice neat little bow. We will quickly preview what you can expect, of course, from the regional qualifiers, and that's happening tomorrow. Like, there's no break. Genuinely an insane decision here by the LPL, but it is what it is. And then of course we will talk about the teams that have qualified for Worlds and that don't have to play any more domestic games in 2024. So with all of that being established, let's get right into the analysis. Of course, this is a matchup between the number 1 seeded Bilibili Gaming and the number 4 seeded Weibo Gaming, and they're coming from very different spots to end up getting here into the finals. Bilibili, of course, the favorite, not only coming into the split, but coming into the year. At least for me, they were the clear number 1 team on paper, and it seems like they've just gotten better over the course of this year. Wei comes in to replace Shun, and this team changes styles. At least in the regular season, they change styles pretty drastically. They get a lot slower, a lot more clinical, and they are a lot more consistent. And I think that's really been the big change. Is this was kind of a streaky team, at least in the spring split. They were the best team by far, but there could be some games here or there where they just didn't show up and their aggressive tendencies were kind of turned on them. You've just seen significantly less bad performances, and what Wei has really done for BLG is allow these really talented mechanical players to just win games regularly without having the fear of being behind going into the mid game. And that's really what's unlocked BLG to be one of the scariest teams in the world, and why I believe they are better now than they were, you know, at MSI going into the spring split. But this team is not perfect. There are some concerns. At times, they can be still a little bit overeager in the early game, specifically in like 1v1 or 2v2s. Outside of Wei, you sometimes do see players like Bin or Elk, or specifically On, step up in situations where they're maybe not kind of allowed to in terms of the game state and get punished for it and, you know, get put in bad positions in the mid game. Usually they can play their way out of it because their macro is really good, but it's worth noting that that is something that happens to Bilibili Gaming. But outside of that, like, there are almost no weaknesses for this team domestically. They've got the best player in the league in the mid lane, and, you know, they're very aggressive, they're very clinical in the late game, they're great team fighters, they're great laners, they're just all around a really solid team, and that's what makes Weibo Gaming such major underdogs here. They've already lost to Bilibili once in the upper bracket in round number 4, I believe it was. You know, BLG's first playoff series, these two teams already played against each other. It wasn't particularly close, but Weibo is on a ridiculous run right now. They take down LNG, the number 2 seed, coming into the playoffs in the lower bracket, and then in the semifinals, they take down Top Esports, a team that was very much projected to beat them in a lot of different avenues. And so Weibo Gaming, very hot, has a lot of momentum, a lot of confidence at the moment, but the question is, do they have the talent to be able to overcome a team like Bilibili? Well, a lot of it is going to start with Tarzan. I think when you're looking for the most important matchup in this series, it is very clearly Wei versus Tarzan. For me, Tarzan is just the heart and soul of Weibo Gaming. When he succeeds, this team succeeds, and they can really do well. When he is not succeeding, when he's not playing particularly well, or when the enemy jungler is just better, Weibo has very little options outside of him. He really has been the guy for Weibo Gaming, an MVP finalist for a lot of people, and, you know, somebody that I've really hyped up over the course of this year. It's going to be very important for him to establish pressure early on in these games. He is the most aggressive jungler in the entire world at the current moment in terms of his early game pathing. That has to come through in the clutch. It's been able to take down players like Tian and like Weiwei because they weren't quite prepared to be able to handle the aggression that was shown, but, you know, Wei is a bit of a different beast. He's really good at calming the storm, and so we'll see what happens with Tarzan, but the rest of this team definitely more questionable, in my opinion. Xiaohu is a big question mark in the mid lane. Of course, this is a very experienced player, somebody who's been to many finals over and over. I think he's like a 5-time champion here in the LPL, but certainly not in the best form of all time. He's gotten better over the course of the playoffs for sure, but, you know, Knight is certainly not the kind of opposition that you would expect him to play his best games ever against. I really like Light and Crisp, specifically Light, who I think has been super consistent, but Crisp, very inconsistent. Again, he's been much better in the playoffs, very important to this team's success in their playoff run, but his regular season performances leave questions about whether or not you're just going to have a bad day out of him on any given day. Breathe is another one of those players that had a ton of bad performances over the course of this year. He has been slightly better in the playoffs. He'll have some breakout games, but the big thing for Weibo is you just don't know which version of this team you're going to get really on any given day. The problem is that if they don't get those early game leads, this team kind of falls apart, and BLG is very good at not giving away free early game leads, and so I think they're very favored, BLG is, in this series, but we'll see what ends up happening. The only way to know is, of course, to go game by game, and that means starting with game number 1. So let's get right into it. The winner of game number 1 was Bilibili Gaming. They are going to take game number 1 in this series. They're going to go up 1-0, and yeah, this was a pretty standard experience. This is kind of what you would have expected out of a game number 1. This is BLG just kind of strangling resources out of Weibo Gaming, them not really being able to match the pressure that's on the other side. You know, BLG doing a really good job in the early laning phase of being able to generate a lot of gold and then just snowballing out of control there. Weibo doing an okay job of trying to stay in the game, but again, these big moments, that's where they start to collapse. That's where BLG really starts to thrive. The Baron completely turns the game around, and once Elk gets that triple kill, the game is over. There's genuinely no way to actually, I think the game was literally over immediately after that play happened. So unfortunately for Weibo, it was close until it wasn't, and I guess that's gonna kind of be the story for Bilibili Gaming. I think that's a pretty good way to describe their style in general. But player of the game for me in game 1 pretty clearly has to go to Knight. I mean, this guy was ridiculous in game number 1 here. Picks up a solo kill on Xiaohu, then picks up another one, I believe, on Light later on in the game in the bot lane, just for no reason. Like, this Smolder was one of those, you expect Smolder to be a champ that struggles in the 1v1, that can't really do anything isolated on his own, but Knight is so good that he's actually able to pick up individual, like, random kills in side lanes just because of how much he can outplay his opposition and bait them into making bad decisions. Not that Weibo needs a ton of baiting to make bad decisions, but Knight is just tremendous. Again, he's the best player in the LPL, and it's not particularly close, in my opinion, from a skill set perspective, even if I do think other players maybe shined a bit more over the course of this split. Knight is unbelievable, and that's shown by the fact that he's in his 4th straight LPL finals. Elk was also incredible here in game number 1. I will continue to go to bat for Elk. He was my pick for MVP, which clearly is a very, very out there choice. I didn't expect that to be something that a lot of people were going to disagree with or not have, but he wasn't even an all-pro for the LPL, but he's my number 1 player. I continue to think he's the most undervalued player in the entire world, and another good Kaisa game here. Now, I will give BLG credit. They enabled him really well. This wasn't just Elk popping off on his own and just destroying everybody and being the sole carry. You know, they did a good job to put the Kaisa in position, but Elk was the one to follow up on basically every single play that BLG made throughout this game. He's just really good in all phases. Typically, when you thought about Elk, even last year, but like especially at the beginning of his career with WE and with, you know, even Ultra Prime, you thought about this guy who would demolish lane and then not be as useful outside of that. You would really just hope that he could snowball the game out of control. Now he's just become such a well-rounded well-rounded player, and he really can obliterate team fights if you give him the right setup. This was a great Kai'Sa game, but it was the carry duo that ended up really performing for BLG. I thought On was pretty good this game on the Alistar as well. Bin and Wei were along for the ride. Wei ends up getting the Baron. That ends up sealing the game at the end there. That's a horrible call from Weibo, and they get very punished for it, but I think outside of that, I don't think Wei played particularly well, but shout out to BLG. This is a pretty good game, number one. Maybe you want to see them be a bit more dominant in the mid game and not really give over as many free things to Weibo Gaming, but their early and their late game I thought were really solid. And then for Weibo, it's just the bad decisions that end up really costing you at such inopportune times. I think obviously the mechanical misplays in the early game are very clear to talk about. Xiaohu, Crisp, I think making some really, really bad decisions in this game. Xiaohu is going to get done of the game for it, but there was an opportunity for them to try to get back into this. I thought Tarzan played phenomenal in the mid game and actually created a ton of opportunities for Weibo to try to get back into this. They just didn't they didn't take advantage of any of them, and that's really frustrating. Tarzan's just trying to do his best, and I'm not trying to sit here and glaze him again, but just this guy's crazy good, and he's constantly looking for opportunities to get his team back into the game, and it's got to be up to his team at some point to accept those opportunities and to actually make the most of them. Like I said, Xiaohu is done of the game. He gets solo killed by Smolder at like level 4. Like, there's just no excuse. There's like absolutely no way that should even be possible. Xiaohu just finds new ways to int every so often. He's really good mechanically on Zeri. Like, he is one of those players that just understands where he needs to be in team fights, but it's always going to be like a mental problem for him. He's just going to have a lapse in judgment and, randomly run it down at least once per game, especially on this champion. And so, I don't really know if it's a benefit for the team at this point, but Xiaohu was not great here. Light and Crisp, I don't think were particularly good. Light was irrelevant on a Ziggs pick that we've actually seen kind of dominate in basically every region. It just has this eternal early game pressure. Kai'Sa's actually been a pretty solid answer to it, but Kai'Sa plus Smolder should be punishable in the early game, and for Weibo to basically lose both of these laning phases, it's really just not ideal. It's not a good situation. Crisp continues to engage at bad times and just doesn't feel connected to the rest of the team. This was kind of the regular season problem for Crisp, and then again, Breathe and Tarzan were there. Like, I don't think they were the problem, again, Tarzan in particular, but Weibo just didn't have the consistency to be able to hold on to some of the small advantages they were getting in the mid game. Their macro is horrendous, and they have to start snowballing games. That's the win condition for Weibo, is to win early, is to get Tarzan, in one of these lanes and get either Xiaohu or Light or even Breathe like snowballed into a place where they can just dominate the mid game. That's how they've gotten here in the first place. So we'll see if they're going to be able to do that and tie up the series in game number 2, or if BLG is going to take that dominant 2-0 lead. If they do, that's a really bad spot for Weibo. Having to win 3 in a row against Bilibili Gaming is a very tough ask, especially here in the LPL finals. So which one is it going to be? Well, the winner of game number 2 was Bilibili Gaming. They are going to take game number 2. They are going to go up in this series 2-0. And yeah, this series is looking a bit doomed for Weibo. This was an absolute destruction. This game was not close. It was not even really like game number 1, where yes, BLG kind of had the pressure throughout all of it, but there were moments where Weibo looked like they could try to fight back in the mid game. You weren't even getting that out of this. This was just a demolition from BLG, who was strong from moment 1, and they never let go of the gas pedal. We talk about Weibo needing to be a team that wins early and starts to snowball. Well, BLG is just straight up better at that style of play. They are by far the best at that style of play in the LPL, and it leads to these circumstances where, like, what do you do if you're Weibo? You're trying to win early and you can't, and then your entire game plan completely falls apart. You're playing Renekton Nidalee on the top side. You've got, like, a pseudo poke comp with the Nidalee, the Corki, the Ezreal. I shouldn't say pseudo. This is a poke comp with the Nidalee, Corki, and the Ezreal, and once that gets super far behind, once you have no more go button, like, how exactly are you ever supposed to win this game? I just, it's unfortunate. I understand the draft for Weibo, and I think generally from a concept level, it ends up making sense, but BLG is just too good. Like, they are better, and that was the execution we saw in this game number 2. Player of the game is once again going to go to Knight. I mean, what do you even want me to say at this point? This guy is, like, actually obliterating Weibo Gaming on his own. It wasn't just him. Well, we're going to talk about everybody else, because I thought everybody had a good game here for BLG, and basically everybody had a bad game here for Weibo Gaming, but Knight is just on a different plane of existence from every other player, let alone every other mid laner in the LPL at this point. His best games are just so much better than everybody else's when he's able to just completely take over. It's undeniable. I mean, this guy always shows up in the clutch. I think he's a 2-time LPL Finals MVP. He is a 1-time MSI Finals MVP. I mean, this guy is a true big-time performer, and obviously hasn't had the success at Worlds, and I think that's really been the only thing gatekeeping people from calling him like a top 2 for sure player in the world. But I mean, come on, like, how much left is there to to prove for Knight, who has just done it over and over and over again domestically. He is just dominating, and I'm not saying that the series is over, but, you know, they're put in such a dominant position through the first 2 games, and a lot of that is just Knight being so much better than one of the most prestigious mid laners in the LPL's history in Xiaohu on the other side of this matchup. And for it to have been, like, so dominating, so not close, like, it's just absurd. Like, Knight is on a different level from everybody else, and he definitely deserves this player of the game. Not that anybody else on BLG played bad. I thought Wei was excellent in the mid game here, constantly in the right position to be able to catch Tarzan or to catch Xiaohu or Breathe or Crisp or anybody out in the mid game to just create even more of a problem for Weibo Gaming moving forward. Wei was excellent, playing his role really well. I think Zyra is one of those champions that looks a lot better in regions like the LPL, where there's a lot of skirmishing, a lot more aggressive things for the Zyra to be able to take advantage of. You know, these close quarter objective fights, that's really where she thrives, and I think Wei obviously piloted her well. Elk with the long range arrows, he didn't even need to be in some of these fights. He would just send an arrow from bot lane while split pushing and taking a turret, while the rest of the team, the rest of BLG, ended up winning 4v5. It genuinely feels unfair on Bin. They were excellent. Like, there's just no notes. Like, there's nothing to say. This is a dominating performance, and for Weibo, it just feels like you're in a bit over your head making it to the finals here. It very much feels like World Finals last year, where Weibo, great job getting here. Really happy to see some of the upsets and some of the shocks to get them here in the first place, but they just don't have the talent to be able to make it count when in the finals, and unfortunately that just seems to be the case. Dud of the game could go to quite a few people. It really came down to 2 for me. It was either Xiaohu or it was Crisp. I think it had to go to one of them. Both of them were unbelievably awful in this game. I'm going to give it to Xiaohu in the mid lane because it felt like the Corki was worse. Not only did he have more opportunities to do things, like Leona just becomes entirely irrelevant once this game starts spiraling out of control. There's literally no opportunity for Crisp to be useful at any point after like 10 minutes in this game, and so I can excuse some of the later deaths. I certainly cannot excuse the earlier deaths because he was just, I don't know what he was doing. We'll get to it in a second, but Xiaohu, you know, throughout this entire game had the opportunity to at least try and do something, and he just wasn't able to do that. He was missing Corki rockets, he was mispositioning, stepping up way too far forward, getting caught. Like, this is a miserable game, like genuinely one of the worst mid lane Corki performances I've seen in quite a long time. So not ideal, really not a good performance from Xiaohu. They needed him to step up, and he so far has just not been able to do that. And like I said, Crisp was horrible. I mean, this laning phase was about as bad as it gets. This is a dud of the game in basically any other circumstance, but Xiaohu really was that bad. This reminds me of all of the LEC support performances that I'm always complaining about from like Mickey X or Hillisang or a lot of those players where they just don't really seem to grasp that certain champions are strong at certain parts of the game, and they're just trying to be aggressive all the time for the sake of being aggressive, and it just doesn't end up working out for them. That's kind of the way that Crisp ended up playing. I mean, this was truly an atrocious game from him on the Leona. Breathe was entirely useless this game, couldn't really trade with Bin at all in the top lane, ended up trying to do some flank plays in the end of the game, but BLG was way too fast and just didn't really allow the Renekton to ever get in position. Not that I think he could have done anything anyways. Tarzan was really good in the early game, constantly pressuring bot lane here, like threatening a dive on Elkanon basically at every single opportunity. Like, he was very active in trying to shut down the bot lane 2v2, but the problem is that Nidalee just completely falls off, and so you're in this situation where Tarzan tried to do stuff in the early game, it didn't exactly work out in getting them a gold lead, and then the champion became useless, and he was just getting caught out over and over again. Like, there's just nothing you can do in that circumstance. Same thing for Light. I don't think he played all that bad, but like, what's an Ezreal supposed to do to save this game? So Weibo Gaming now going into game number 3, down 0-2. Not a great position. You've got to win 3 games in a row against Bilibili to win the finals. I think at this point they would take a game win with how the first 2 games have gone, but BLG want to close this out. They want to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that they are the best team in the LPL, and they've set themselves up in a really good position to do that. So are they going to be able to close this out in a 3-0 clean sweep, or is Weibo going to win 1 game and push us to a game number 4? Well, the winner of game number 3 was Bilibili Gaming. They are going to take game number 3. They are going to take this series in a clean 3-0 sweep, and your 2024 LPL Summer Split champions are Bilibili Gaming. Congratulations to them. Obviously, they've deserved it. They've been the best team in the LPL all year long. They've basically never dropped. I actually don't think they've ever dropped from number 1 in my power rankings. They were number 1 going into the year in January. They've stayed number 1 throughout the entirety of the year. There's there's really not even been that many ups and downs for them. They've just kind of dominated the competition, and they are going to Worlds as the #1 seed from the LPL. This certainly makes things a bit more interesting for Weibo as well with this loss. They actually do not qualify for the World Championships. This was obviously kind of their expected outcome, but because #2 is not just whoever gets second in the LPL summer split, it's actually a championship points thing. Weibo actually doesn't have enough championship points to qualify for Worlds over a team like Top Esports. So, Top is in. We'll talk about that in just a second, but let's talk about this Game 3 before we talk about the big ramifications of BLG being your Summer Split Champions. Player of the game in Game 3, pretty obviously, is going to go to Elk here on the Jhin. We'll talk about it now. This entire team, like BLG, got mega griefed by On in this game. This was ridiculous. I mean, it truly was one of the Bard performances of all time. It obviously didn't matter. Like, the rest of the team was good enough to be able to win. Elk got mega fed on the Jhin, and that champion does so much damage when he has a ton of gold. I talk about this all the time. Jhin is another one of the least valued, most undervalued, I guess you could say, champions in the world. I just don't really think people understand how good Jhin is at the current moment if you can get him rolling, and he really doesn't need all that many resources to get rolling in the first place. He does so many things well, and he basically does it without any sort of investment, and so you feel really good about the champion. But shout out On. I gotta talk about him first. He's gonna get dud of the game for game #3. Feels kind of funny. I don't think he's gonna mind too much getting dud of the game now that he is, a back-to-back champion here in the LPL, but this was certainly one of the Bard games of all time. I mean, actively griefing his team in multiple key situations, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, getting caught out regularly. This was a really bad game from On. It just didn't end up mattering because the rest of the team was so good, but Elk really carrying the team in terms of damage in the back half. He's just phenomenal. I mean, at what point are we going to start saying, okay, Elk is probably the best AD carry in the world? I've been saying it for months at this point. Watching the tape, it's very clear to me, as somebody who watches every region, like on tape, when you just watch the games, there is nobody who plays better than Elk right now in the AD carry role. You can maybe argue that, his situation's easier because he gets to play with Knight, and now he gets to play with someone like Wei, even like Bin in the top lane. On has been a huge positive. Like, he's got phenomenal teammates around him, and you've got players like Viper who maybe don't have that same, system. Someone like a Jackie Love, I think, is also kind of thrown into that conversation. But to me, Elk is so clearly the #1 AD carry in terms of production right now in the world that I just can't call him anything other than the best ADC at the current moment. And he's somebody that I really think is going to, step up for this team in big moments. He is a clutch player. At least he has been over the course of his domestic career. This was just another example of him really showing out when they needed him. But player of the series, finals MVP for me, super obvious choice. It's got to go to Knight in the mid lane. Like, there was really no, debating this back and forth. This was the only option here for BLG. He just was so good. Like, he was so crazy good through the first 2 games, and I get the Smolder wasn't quite as dominant here in Game 3, and that might leave a, was he just okay? No, he was way, way better than okay, and he still was dominating in the back half of this game on the Smolder. It just took him a little bit more time to get going. He didn't get the random solo kill in lane at level 4 that he was able to get in game #1 to get the Smolder ahead, but still, this was a really good game from Knight, and every single time he plays in these big moments domestically, it is so clear just how much better he is than the people that he's playing into mechanically. It's very fun to watch. Bin was super essential in the back half of this game, even if the scoreline does look a bit suspect. Wei has come in and completely reinvigorated this team with confidence and with consistency, which I think is the big part for him. BLG is the best team in the LPL, and they are, in my opinion, one of the 2 best teams in the world very, very clearly at the moment. This team has a real shot to win Worlds because they have gotten better. They have leveled up, and as good as Genji is, they're not, unbeatable. Nobody's unbeatable, and BLG is certainly good enough to at least make a strong effort. But for Weibo Gaming, you've just got to feel a little bit bad for them. Obviously, I think they came into this series expecting to not be particularly competitive, but, at least Game 3 was something. I think that there were definitely some more positives in Game 3 than there were in the other games. Xiao, who definitely had his best game of the series. Tarzan continued to be a massive positive for them, taking advantage of some of the mistakes that BLG was making. Weibo actually got a lot of gold from On just kind of running it down, and so you feel good about that, but they just didn't have the firepower or, quite frankly, the mechanics to be able to outplay BLG when it mattered the most in the end game. And so it just kind of is what it is. You have to live with it if you're a Weibo gaming fan. I'm sure that they're happy that they got to the finals in the first place, but the most disappointing part of this for Weibo is, of course, that you've made finals and you actually don't qualify for Worlds from it. You're going to be moving into the regional qualifiers again. You don't have the championship points that Top Esports have right now because you weren't particularly good in the spring split. This has been kind of a summer split emergence, but I trust Weibo a lot to be able to take care of a lot of the competition there. I still think this team has very clear positives. Tarzan is a monster, and even in this series where basically everything went wrong for Weibo, especially in the first 2 games, Tarzan still looked really good. He was really solid in game 1. He did the Nidalee thing in game 2. He just couldn't get his team a gold lead, and then he was pretty solid here in game 3 on the brand. He was easily the best player on Weibo in the finals, and he's somebody that I trust a lot in terms of the way that this team plays around him and how integral he has been, how consistent, quite frankly, he has been for this team over the course of this year. And so I'm not super worried about him. Obviously, people are going to point fingers at players like Xiaohu and Crisp, who had really bad finals, and I agree with that. Like, Xiaohu was okay here in Game 3, definitely much better than the first 2 games, but the first 2 games were so bad that the expectation was just gigantically low. For the Corki in particular, like, you just want to see him on something that can be consistent. You want to see him, I don't know, actually land rockets, like, do damage. That's kind of the goal here, so that was a good step up, but if he can play against, you know, the players that he was actually able to play against well, you know, like Top Esports and like LNG, who obviously they're going to face in the first round of the regional qualifiers, you know, Scout, I think that that could be a really big matchup for Weibo, and Xiaohu's performance really does turn a lot for them, I would say. Crisp also needs to be a lot better than he was in this series, even with On struggling. I don't think Crisp was particularly phenomenal in any of these games, again, especially game 2, where I thought he was atrocious, but just inconsistency. That's what plagues Weibo, is you just don't really know what version of them you're going to get on any given day. That's always been the problem with this org, and that's kind of led to some good results in the past, but it's a very different kind of team now. This isn't like the Shy, where it's clear just like whenever he's locked in, whenever he's trying, that's when the team is going to do well. When he gets to Worlds and he actually cares about the games that he's playing, then all of a sudden Weibo can play through him and everything else kind of unlocks it, pushes everyone down on the totem pole. It's not that kind of inconsistency. The inconsistency comes from players just actively having good and bad days. It's not an effort problem, which is way harder to solve. And so for Weibo, there are some real concerns, but we've already seen the upside of this team. We've seen them be able to take down the 2 other, what people consider the best teams in the LPL, in LNG and Top Esports outside of BLG. And, you know, we've seen them do it pretty convincingly. I still have faith in this team, but this is just a really tragic matchup, and they lost because of it. But BLG doesn't just secure their own spot. They've already secured it, obviously, by winning winners finals, you know, getting to finals in the first place. At worst, they could be the number 2 seed if they lost here, but winning this gets them to number 1 seed, and winning this also gets Top Esports the number 2 seed going into the playoffs, or going into Worlds, I should say, because again, they have the most championship points. This is going to be seen by some as like unfairly given out to Top Esports, because people always complain that the summer playoffs are not the sole dictator of who ends up going to Worlds. I like the championship point system. I've always kind of favored it in the past. We've seen some good and some bad moments of it, but I think it's fine to actually make spring matter in some way, shape, or form. I think Worlds is the culmination of 2024, not just the culmination of summer split, at least in my opinion. And so having something that rewards teams doing well in spring, or that punishes teams doing really bad in spring and then stepping it up in summer, I think that that's generally a fair system, and Top Esports is the one to benefit here. Not that anyone's surprised, Top Esports making Worlds was kind of a foregone conclusion. Even if they did go through the regional qualifier, they were so much better than every other team in that section that I don't think it would be particularly close. But it's now going to have to be Weibo that goes down there, and we'll talk about that in a second. But congrats to Top Esports, and specifically congrats to BLG, because they've absolutely earned this championship. And honestly, for an org that struggled so long to find a team that was, I guess, good enough to be able to latch onto, and, you know, they've put a lot of time and money and resources into trying to become an LPL champion, for this to be the roster that gets it done, and for this year to be kind of really all about them domestically, you just have to be excited for the org and for the players. All right, but that is going to do it for my LPL Summer Playoffs Finals overview and analysis video. Congratulations to your 2024 LPL Summer Split champions, Bilibili Gaming. They've more than earned it. Knight more than earning Finals MVP. 4 straight championships for Knight. I think he's made 6 of the last 6 finals. Like, I could be wrong about that. I think it was like 8 of the last 10 finals had Knight in it. I mean, he is very quickly like rising up in terms of like not only LPL GOATs, because I think there's like an argument to be made that he is not only the LPL GOAT, but like at minimum, like top 2. I certainly think that there is some argument to be made on that level with just his domestic accomplishments, but I mean, this guy, as I tweeted about, is on pace to be a top 3, top 5 player of all time. Like, in terms of just the entire scope of League of Legends, like the professional esports scene, it is ridiculous how much he has dominated the LPL in the era that I would consider it to be the strongest it's ever been. So, you know, Knight definitely deserves a lot of the shouts. You know, Wei joining this team midway through the year and becoming champion is massive. You know, he was last place with RNG, switches teams and wins the LPL. It's pretty fun. You've got someone like Bin in the top lane who's very consistently been the best top laner in the world. Elk and On, who I think are the most underrated bot lane. Elk is the best AD carry in the world right now. On, despite his Bard game, is a support that really helped this team a lot and is arguably the best support in the world right now. Like, Bilibili is just unreal. They are ridiculously talented across the board, and they're really fun to watch, and they've earned this championship. They have been the best team in the LPL, and they are going as the #1 seed. But who's going to be joining them as the 3 and 4 seeds? Let's check out the regional finals here up on the screen. Of course, 4 teams participating, 2 seeds up for grabs. Weibo Gaming and LNG will face each other. The winner of that becomes the #3 seed. The loser of that plays the winner of Ninjas in Pajamas and JD Gaming to determine who goes as the #4 seed. So, quite a bit of an interesting tournament. Some interesting thoughts. I guess I can give my predictions really quick here. I would expect Weibo and LNG to be the 2 teams that are going, representing the LPL. Perhaps JD Gaming can figure something out and make a run. I would be stunned if Ninjas in Pajamas ends up making Worlds. Maybe beating JD Gaming is on the table. They've already done it once in a best of 5 in the playoffs, but I would be shocked if they could beat both JDG and LNG and Weibo Gaming. It just feels a bit out of their depth. Like, I don't think they have the talent to be able to do that. I'm very worried about bot lane. Top lane has been a huge issue for them. But if JD Gaming can get their shit together and actually play up to the talent level of the team, then they should be a team going as the #4 seed, and I think they would be very interesting as the #4 seed, but at least for now, it's hard to bet against Weibo Gaming and LNG. I think Weibo has a clear path to #3. They should be able to just beat LNG. They have a great matchup into them. LNG, this late game, very, like, passive team, quite frankly. In the early game, Weibo likes to snowball, and they should get it basically for free, like they did in that, 4th, 3rd place matchup against LNG in the playoffs. So, again, I would expect Weibo to be pretty heavily favored there, but if JDG ends up making it over a team like LNG, I think that that's very possible. I would be much more surprised if it was NIP, though. So let me know if you agree or disagree with those takes down in the comments, and of course, I am gone for the weekend, and so with regional finals starting up tomorrow, I'm actually going to do all of it in one video. Hopefully that will come out, Tuesday, Wednesday, sometime there. It's the end of the LPL season. I'm going to be gone from Saturday to Monday, and so we're going to try to fit things in where we can. There's going to be a lot of videos to get out, probably like 8 over the course of 5 days or so. Just kind of how it is when you take a vacation in this little side profession, but I do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like. It really does mean a lot to me. Lets me know you guys are enjoying the content, and it does help get this video out to a lot more people. If you're new here, hit subscribe. I know the LPL summer split is over here, or at least everything before the regional finals is over, but I cover all 4 of the major regions as well. So LCS, LEC, LCK, as well as the NACL, Tier 2 over in North America. So if you want a comprehensive overview of everything going on in LoL esports, especially with Worlds right around the corner, which of course we will also be covering on this channel, this is the place for it. Hit subscribe and hit that bell so you can be notified when those videos do go live. But of course, with all that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.